Before you read, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment with your opinion. Julian Thorne had it all. A titan of the Hamptons real estate market, his name was synonymous with success. He was a master of turning forgotten properties into architectural gems, and his meticulously planned life was a testament to his ambition. But on this sunny June morning, as he adjusted the knot of his designer tie in the full-length mirror of his oceanfront mansion, a small, dark part of him harbored a secret. He hadn't just invited his ex-girlfriend, Clara Reynolds, to his wedding to Victoria Sterling. He'd done it to show her what she'd lost. A calculated, silent message. Look at what I've become without you. A small act of revenge against the woman who once dared to question his methods. Julian had crafted his life like a perfect sculpture, and this marriage was the final, breathtaking piece. What could possibly go wrong? Julian smoothed the silk handkerchief in the pocket of his bespoke jacket, his ocean blue eyes scanning his reflection. Flawless, just as everything had to be on this, the most important day of his life. He watched through the window as the final touches were put on the garden ceremony. White tents, tables with imported linen, and a temporary marble dance floor. 200 hand-picked guests, the city's elite, were arriving. "Mr. Thorne, the first guests have arrived," announced Marcus, his personal assistant, breaking Julian's concentration. Ensure Victoria stays in her suite until the right time. Tradition is tradition. As Marcus left, Julian took a moment to glance at the guest list he'd memorized. His eyes stopped at a name he had added just 2 weeks ago. Clara Reynolds. A name from a past he had left behind 8 years ago, when he decided nothing, not even love, would stand in his way to the top. Clara had been his college sweetheart, a passionate idealist who dreamed of changing lives through education. But while she dreamt of schools, he dreamt of skyscrapers. Their diverging paths led to a heated argument, ending with him declaring, "Our worlds are incompatible, Clara. I'm destined for great things." The wedding invitation was his final word. "Julian, are you ready? The special guests are arriving." The voice of Walter Sterling, his future father-in-law and business partner, pulled him back to the present. Julian smiled with confidence. "Always ready, Walter. Today marks the beginning of a new era for Thorne Construction." They walked down the marble staircase, and Julian was met with a chorus of congratulations from powerful figures. Each handshake, each conversation, was a calculated move to strengthen alliances. "Julian, my friend, what a spectacular event," exclaimed Patrick Sullivan, the Minister of Urban Development, approaching with a glass of champagne. "Your new financial district project has my full support. We should meet next week to discuss the details." Julian smiled. Even at his wedding, business never stopped. "Of course, Patrick. My assistant will coordinate the meeting." As the string quartet played classical music and waiters circulated with Michelin star hors d'oeuvres, Julian's calm facade was a lie. A gnawing anxiety grew within him. Would Clara come? Had she received his silent message? Would she see the magnitude of his success? At 4 o'clock, as the sun began its descent, Julian stood at the altar overlooking the sea. The guests were seated, and a gentle ocean breeze stirred the flowers. That's when he saw her. Clara Reynolds walked gracefully through the guests, looking for a seat. She wore a navy blue dress that contrasted beautifully with her pale skin, her brown hair pulled into an elegant bun. But she wasn't alone. On either side of her, holding her hands, were 2 identical boys, about 8 years old, wearing matching suits, and with the same piercing blue eyes as Julian. Do you think Julian had ever considered the possibility of having a family he didn't know about? What would you have done in his place? Time seemed to stop. The murmur of conversation faded, replaced by the frantic beating of Julian's heart. Those boys had his nose, his chin, the same slight frown when something caught their attention. Clara met his gaze for a moment that felt like an eternity. There was no hatred in her eyes, no triumph at ruining his perfect day, only determination, and perhaps a hint of sadness. Julian felt the ground give way beneath him. "It can't be," he whispered to himself as the guests began to notice his shock. The silence spread like a wave. The music abruptly stopped. "Julian, what's wrong?" Victoria's voice came from his right. He hadn't noticed his radiant fiancée standing beside him. But Julian couldn't tear his eyes away from the two boys, now observing him with innocent curiosity. Clara, seeing the commotion, quietly led the children away to the side of the garden. "Julian, they are waiting for you," Marcus insisted, noticing the confused stares. With a Herculean effort, Julian turned his attention back to Victoria and the officiant. But his mind was elsewhere. He remembered the emails he had marked as spam, unread, because they were from her address. The letters he had thrown away unopened. The calls he never answered. It was possible. Those children were his. "Julian Thorne, do you take Victoria Sterling to be your lawful wife, to love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for all the days of your life?" The question brought him back to reality. Victoria looked at him, her smile trembling. The guests held their breath. He began. But the words wouldn't come. The control he had always exerted over every aspect of his life was crumbling before his eyes. "Julian," Victoria insisted, now visibly worried. "I'm sorry," he finally managed to articulate. "I need a moment." Without waiting for a response, Julian left the altar and walked directly toward Clara and the boys. He could feel the stunned stares, hear the clicks of phones. He could foresee tomorrow's headlines, but none of it mattered now. "I didn't come to ruin your day, Julian," Clara said, her voice calm but firm. "But they deserved to meet you, and you deserved to meet them." The boys watched with the innocent curiosity of their age. Julian knelt down to their level. "Hi," he said, his voice trembling. "My name is Julian." "We know who you are," one of them replied with surprising composure. "Mom told us about you. I'm Alex." "And I'm Miguel," the other added with a shy smile. "Is it true you build really tall buildings?" The simplicity of the question, in the midst of that moment of absolute tension, caused a strange mix of emotions in Julian. A nervous laugh escaped his lips, followed by a lump in his throat that threatened to release a torrent of tears. "Yes," he managed to reply. "I build buildings." "They were born in December," Clara said, placing her hands on their shoulders. "They'll be 8 this year." The timeline coincided. 8 years ago, when their relationship ended, when he was too busy chasing his ambitions to pay attention to anything else. 8 years during which these boys, his sons, had grown up without knowing him. "Why now?" he finally asked, standing up to face Clara. "Because you are established now. Because nothing can stand between you and your ambitions," she replied with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "And because they started asking questions about their father that I couldn't keep avoiding." The world around Julian seemed to have vanished. He no longer heard the whispers, felt the sea breeze, or noticed Victoria watching from the altar. At that moment, looking into the eyes of his two boys, Julian Thorne, the man who had planned every minute of his ascent to success, had no idea what to do next. And for the first time in his adult life, that didn't terrify him. It awakened him. The 2 weeks that followed the failed marriage were the most chaotic of Julian Thorne's life. The news spread like wildfire. The real estate mogul leaves his fiancée at the altar after discovering he has twin sons. The tabloids blared. Thorn Construction's shares fell 5% the next Monday. Julian secluded himself, ignoring everyone except Marcus, his loyal assistant, who filtered calls and kept journalists at bay. "Mr. Thorn, Victoria has called for the 10th time today," Marcus said, placing a cup of coffee on the mahogany desk where Julian was obsessively reviewing old archived emails. He was looking for something, some evidence that Clara had tried to contact him. And there they were, in a folder marked Spam. Dozens of emails from Clara, all from 8 years ago, with titles like, "We need to talk urgently. Something important has happened." The growing desperation in those words now hit him like a slap. "I've contacted David Finch," Marcus continued, referring to the city's best private investigator. "He'll be here in an hour." Julian finally looked up from the screen. His eyes, red from lack of sleep, reflected a vulnerability his assistant had never seen. "Do you really think they're my sons?" Marcus, who had been by his side since the company's inception, allowed himself a moment of sincerity. "The resemblance is undeniable, sir. They have your eyes." Julian nodded slowly. A part of him already knew. But he needed certainty. He needed control in the midst of the chaos that was now his life. David Finch, the investigator, was a direct man with a penetrating gaze. He listened intently as Julian explained the situation. "I need to know the truth," Julian concluded. "I need to confirm if those boys are really my sons." "I understand," Finch replied. "There are several ways we can proceed. The most discreet would be to obtain day samples without the knowledge of the mother or the children. A hair, a used glass." Julian frowned. "Are you suggesting I spy on 2 7-year-olds? It's the fastest method and would cause the least media uproar," the investigator responded pragmatically. "Considering your public position, Mr. Thorn, I assume discretion is a priority." Julian stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the New York skyline. The buildings he himself had helped build stood as monuments to his ambition. He had always done what was necessary to protect his interests, to advance, to win. Why was he hesitating now? "No," he finally said, surprising even himself. "We won't do that. I want an official paternity test with all legal guarantees." Finch looked at him with genuine surprise. "That would mean contacting Ms. Reynolds directly, establishing a legal procedure, and of course attracting additional media attention." "I know," Julian replied, "but it's the right thing to do. If those children are my sons, I won't start my relationship with them based on deception." That same afternoon, Julian did something he had never contemplated before. He called Clara directly. Her number was still in his phone, untouched after 8 years. "Julian," she answered on the 3rd ring, her voice as familiar as the first day. There was no surprise in her tone, as if she had been waiting for this call for years. "Clara," he began, discovering he didn't know what to say. We need to talk." "Yes, we do," she agreed. "I'll take a hand for the boys." They arranged to meet in a park near the school where Clara worked as a literature teacher. It was a neutral, public yet discreet place, far from the neighborhoods where paparazzi usually lurked. The park was bustling with life that July afternoon. Julian, dressed in casual clothes to go unnoticed, sat on the agreed-upon bench, feeling an anxiety he hadn't experienced since his first real estate negotiations. He saw her coming from a distance. Clara walked with that mix of determination and grace that had always characterized her. She wore a simple summer dress, her hair down, so different from the executives in designer suits that now populated his life. "Thanks for coming," Julian said when she sat beside him, maintaining a prudent distance. "I'm not doing it for you," Clara replied frankly, but without hostility. "I'm doing it for Alex and Miguel. They deserve to know their origins." Julian nodded, accepting the truth of her words. "I want to get a paternity test," he said directly. Not because I doubt you, but because I need certainty. Clara studied him for a long moment. And what will you do with that certainty, Julian? Will you disappear again when you confirm what you already know? Or will you take responsibility this time? The question hit Julian deep in his soul. All his adult life, he had defined responsibility as fulfilling contracts, paying debts, and building projects on time, never as raising children, being present, or giving love. I don't know, he admitted, with an honesty that surprised him. But I want to try. A week later, the results confirmed what everyone already suspected. Julian Thorne was, without a doubt, the biological father of Alex and Miguel Reynolds. The clinical laboratory where the test was performed seemed excessively quiet as the doctor handed them the envelope. Julian opened it with trembling hands, while Clara watched calmly beside him. 99.99% probability of paternity, he read aloud, the words seeming surreal on his lips. Satisfied? Clara asked, without triumph, only with that direct sincerity that had always characterized her. Julian carefully folded the paper and put it in his inner jacket pocket, close to his heart. Can I meet them? Formally, I mean, as their father. The first formal meeting was arranged at Clara's apartment, a warm flat in a bustling neighborhood filled with books, plants, and evidence of a happy family life, so different from the cold, calculated minimalism of Julian's penthouse. Alex, the more extroverted twin, bombarded him with questions from the moment he walked in. Is it true you have a helicopter? Did you build the tallest building in New York? Why didn't you come to see us before? Do you like video games? Miguel, more reserved, watched him from a safe distance, evaluating him with an intensity that reminded Julian of Clara herself. Julian found himself awkwardly navigating this new territory. I don't have a helicopter, but I do have a sports car, he replied, feeling strangely like he was being interviewed. And yes, I participated in building some of the city's tallest buildings. When he got to the question about his absence, Julian looked at Clara, who was watching from the kitchen doorway. I didn't know about you, he finally said, opting for a partial truth. And that is something I deeply regret. The afternoon passed with stilted conversations and moments of uncomfortable silence. Julian discovered that Alex had a passion for architecture that seemed almost genetic, while Miguel showed a natural talent for music, playing the piano with a sensitivity that was totally alien to him. When he left, promising to come back soon, he felt as if he had lived an alternate life for a few hours. A life that could have been his if he had made different decisions 8 years ago. Did Julian's past ambition lead him to a life he didn't truly want? What do you think is more valuable, material success or family connection? The return to his corporate reality was brutal. The next day, at Thorne Construction headquarters, the entire board was waiting for him for an emergency meeting. Julian, we understand you're going through a complicated personal time, began Richard Thompson, the oldest and most conservative shareholder. But the company is suffering, investors are nervous, projects are behind schedule, and the press won't stop speculating. What Richard is trying to say, interjected Robert Hayes, another important partner, is that we need a strategy to handle this situation. Perhaps a public statement, denying paternity, or at least sowing doubt, until the matter cools down. Julian looked at them one by one. These were the men with whom he had built an empire. Now they were asking him to deny his own children to protect the stock price. I am not going to deny my children, he said, with a firmness that surprised everyone. The paternity test results are conclusive, and I will not begin my relationship with them with a public lie. The room erupted into a chaos of voices. Think of the company. The shareholders deserve stability. It's your legacy that's at stake. Julian held up a hand, gradually silencing the uproar. My decision is made. We will prepare a statement acknowledging paternity and requesting respect for the children's privacy. The company will adapt. That night, alone in his penthouse, Julian looked out at the city lights, holding an old photograph he had unearthed. In it, Clara and he smiled at the camera from the steps of the Faculty of Architecture, young and in love, with their whole future ahead of them. Where had he gone wrong? When had professional success become the only measure of his life? And, most importantly, how could he now, at 42, learn to be a father to children who had already formed their own lives without him? The ring of his phone interrupted his thoughts. It was Victoria, who had finally managed to reach him directly. "I gave you time, Julian," she said without preamble. "I gave you space to process what happened, but I deserve an explanation. You left me at the altar in front of 200 people." Julian closed his eyes, feeling the weight of another responsibility, of another hurt he had caused. "I know, Victoria, and I am deeply sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Are they really your sons?" she asked, her voice a mix of pain and curiosity. "Yes," Julian confirmed. "The paternity test confirmed it." A long silence followed. Finally, Victoria spoke with surprising calm. "And what do you plan to do now?" It was the same question Clara had asked, the same one he had been asking himself constantly for 2 weeks. But this time, something inside him seemed clearer. "I'm going to get to know them," he replied. "I'm going to learn to be their father, if they'll have me. And I'm going to reorganize my priorities." "I understand," Victoria said, and Julian could tell she really did. "I always knew there was a part of you I never fully got to know, Julian. Maybe this is your chance to get to know yourself, too." The call ended shortly after, with a cordial but final goodbye, one door closing as others began to open. The next morning, against all expectations, Julian Thorne, the man known for his relentless work ethic, did not show up at his office. Instead, he was sitting on a bench in front of St. Gabriel's School, watching from a distance as Alex and Miguel walked into the building, backpacks on their shoulders, chatting animatedly. He didn't approach. He didn't want to interrupt their routine. He just wanted to see them, to absorb the reality that these two human beings carried his blood, that for 8 years they had been growing, learning, laughing, and crying without him even knowing of their existence. "It's strange, isn't it?" Clara's voice startled him. He hadn't seen her approach. To see them, and know they are a part of you, but not truly know them. Julian nodded, without taking his eyes off the door where the boys had disappeared. "How did you do it, Clara? How did you raise them alone all these years?" Clara sat down beside him, maintaining a prudent distance. "It wasn't easy, but I have good friends. My parents helped a lot, and the school where I work has been understanding with my schedule." She paused and added, "Besides, they are wonderful children. They make every sacrifice worth it." Julian felt a pang of simultaneous admiration and shame. While he had been building empires of glass and steel, she had been building something infinitely more valuable, 2 whole human beings. "I want to be a part of their lives," he said, with a conviction that surprised both of them. "I don't know how to be a father, not the slightest idea. But I want to learn. If they will give me that chance." Clara studied him with that penetrating gaze she had always had, as if she could see beyond his words, to the very core of his intentions. "It won't be easy," she finally warned. "You can't just pop in and out of their lives according to your convenience or your work schedule. If you're going to be in, you have to be in for real, Julian. They've already lived 8 years without a father. Don't get their hopes up just to disappear again." The words hit Julian with the force of an undeniable truth. For the first time in his adult life, he would have to commit to something he couldn't completely control, couldn't plan on a spreadsheet, or delegate to subordinates. "I understand," he replied, meeting Clara's gaze. "And I promise I will try with all my might." A ray of late summer sun illuminated the bench where they sat. a harbinger of something new beginning to sprout from the rubble of an imperfect past. August arrived in the Hamptons with an explosion of warmth. The parks were filled with families, and the terraces were alive with people. For Julian Thorne, however, the summer brought a completely new challenge. Learning to be a father to two boys he barely knew. His first strategy was the only one he knew, to impress with material resources. One Saturday morning, he appeared at Clara's apartment with two enormous boxes. "What's all this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow as the twins watched curiously from the hallway. "Gifts," Julian replied, with a nervous smile. "I thought you would like them." Alex and Miguel eagerly opened the packages. Inside, they found the latest tablets, high-end headphones, video games, and exclusive brand-name clothes. "Wow!" Alex exclaimed, holding up the tablet like a treasure. "This is great. Thank you." Miguel, however, looked at his gift with a confused expression. "It's really nice," he finally said. "But we already have a tablet at home that we share. Mom says it's enough for both of us." Julian looked at Clara, who maintained a neutral expression, allowing the situation to unfold without her intervention. "Well," Julian responded, baffled for the first time. "Now each of you will have your own. They're the most advanced ones on the market." Miguel carefully placed the tablet on the table. "Thanks, but could we do something together instead of playing with this? David, my friend's dad, always takes him to play soccer on Saturdays in the park." The simple request left Julian speechless. In his mind, expensive gifts were the most effective way to show affection, to make up for his absence. He had never considered that a child might prefer his time and attention over a luxury item. Of course," he finally replied. "We can go to the park if you want." The park was full of families enjoying the good weather. Julian felt strangely out of place in his Italian shoes and designer watch, surrounded by parents in sports clothes chasing after their children without worrying about their appearance. Miguel took a worn-out ball from his backpack, and soon the three of them were playing an impromptu game in a clearing among the trees. Julian, who hadn't played soccer since college, discovered muscles he had forgotten he had. "Pass, Dad!" Alex shouted in the middle of the game. The word "Dad" resonated in Julian's ears like an unexpected bell. It was the first time either of the boys had called him that, and the emotional impact was greater than he could have ever imagined. For a moment he stood frozen, the ball at his feet, feeling a mixture of pride and absolute terror at the responsibility that simple title entailed. "Julian!" Clara's voice brought him back to reality. She was sitting on a nearby bench, watching them with an expression that mixed caution and something akin to hope. "They're waiting for you!" Julian refocused on the game, passing the ball to Miguel, who received it with a smile that lit up his entire face. It was a genuine smile, without calculation or your hidden expectations. After an hour of playing, the four of them sat on the grass to share an impromptu picnic that Clara had prepared. Simple sandwiches, fruit, and juice boxes. It was so different from the Michelin star restaurants Julian was used to, and yet at that moment, there was nowhere he would rather be. "Do you have a soccer field at your house?" Alex asked, his mouth full. Julian shook his head. "No, I live in a penthouse downtown. It has a large terrace, but not big enough to play soccer." "So how do you have fun?" the boy insisted with brutal, childlike honesty. The question left Julian momentarily speechless. How did he have fun? Closing multi-million-dollar deals, attending exclusive events where he had strategic conversations with politicians and businessmen. Was that fun, or just another form of work? "I guess I haven't had much fun lately," he finally admitted, with an honesty that even surprised Clara. The following Monday, Julian returned to his office with a new perspective. The corporate crises that once consumed his attention now seemed less urgent, less definitive. In the morning meeting with his executives, he found himself thinking about the expression on Miguel's face when he taught him how to pass the soccer ball, instead of concentrating on the quarterly performance charts. "Julian, are you listening?" The irritated voice of Michael Davies, his financial director, brought him back to the boardroom. "Yes, of course," he replied automatically. "Continue." "As I was saying," Michael continued, with evident frustration, "the American investors are reconsidering their participation in the Crystal Tower project due to perceived instability in the company's leadership." "Instability?" Julian frowned. Robert Hayes cleared his throat uncomfortably. "They are referring to your personal situation, Julian. The news about your children and the canceled marriage has generated concern. Jenkins and Associates suggests you make a formal statement denying any distraction and reaffirming your exclusive commitment to the company." Julian looked at the faces around the table, men and women with whom he had built an empire. People who respected ambition and determination above all else. People like he had been just a month ago. "I will not deny my children," he said calmly, "and I will not pretend that they are a minor distraction in my life. They are my priority now, along with the company." A tense silence followed his declaration. Finally, Michael spoke in a calculating tone. "No one is suggesting you publicly deny them, Julian. Just that you minimize their importance in your public life. It's a matter of corporate image." "My answer is still no," Julian replied, standing up. "Find another way to reassure investors. And now, if you'll excuse me." Important appointment. The important appointment was, in fact, a meeting with Alex and Miguel's teacher at St. Gabriel's school. Clara had asked him to attend, as part of his gradual integration into the boys' lives. The school, a century-old building in the heart of New York, had little in common with the elite institutions where Julian had considered enrolling his future children with Victoria. There were no tennis courts or Olympic pools here, just well-kept playgrounds, where children played with carefree energy. "Mr. Thorne," greeted Miss Henderson, a woman in her 50s with red-rimmed glasses and a kind smile. "Clara has brought me up to date on your particular situation." "Welcome." Julian was grateful for the reception, free of the condescension or morbid curiosity he had expected. For the next hour, he listened attentively as the teacher explained his son's academic and social development. "Alex is outgoing, popular among his classmates, though sometimes a little too impulsive," the teacher explained. "Miguel is more reflective, extremely creative, especially in music and art. Both are excellent students, which is a testament to the wonderful job Clara has done with them." Julian nodded, feeling a mixture of paternal pride and a dull ache for the lost years. "Is there anything I can do to help? I mean, besides financial support?" Ms. Henderson looked at him over her glasses with an evaluative expression. "Your time, Mr. Thorne. Children need your time and constant presence, not just occasional appearances. They are at a crucial age where a father figure is particularly important for their emotional development." Back in his office, Julian made a decision that would have been unthinkable just a few weeks ago. He called Marcus and asked him to rearrange his schedule to finish at 5 o'clock every day, except in the case of real emergencies. "Every day?" Marcus asked, perplexed. "But the meetings with Asian investors are always at 7, due to the time difference." "Well, we'll have to reschedule them for the morning," Julian replied firmly. "From now on, my afternoons are for my children." At the end of August, Julian decided to invite the twins to his apartment for the first time. He wanted them to see his world, but he also realized, as he walked through the immaculate rooms decorated by a famous interior designer, that his home was not prepared for children. There was no color, no warmth, nothing that reflected family life. On an impulse, the Friday before their visit, Julian left the office early and went to a supermarket. He, who had never cooked anything more complicated than a fried egg, filled his cart with ingredients for homemade pizza, following a recipe he found online. On Saturday, when Clara dropped the boys off, they looked in awe at the spacious penthouse with panoramic views of New York. "I can see our school from here," Alex exclaimed, his face pressed against the window. "Do you have video games?" Miguel asked, exploring the minimalist living room. "No," Julian admitted. "But I thought we could do something special today. We're going to make our own food." The kitchen, a designer space he rarely used, soon became a culinary battlefield. Flour everywhere, tomato sauce splattering immaculate surfaces, and 3 pairs of hands kneading dough, spreading ingredients, and laughing at the occasional disaster. "Dad, your pizza looks like a deformed monster," Alex laughed when Julian tried to shape his dough. There it was again, that word. Dad! This time, instead of paralyzing him, it gave Julian a warm feeling in his chest. "Well, it will be a delicious monster," he replied, playfully throwing a handful of flour at the boy, a gesture he had never allowed himself before. When Clara came to pick them up, she found something she never would have imagined. Julian Thorne, the impeccable real estate mogul, sitting on the floor of his designer kitchen, covered in flour and sauce, playing cards with his sons among the remains of homemade pizza. "It looks like you had fun," she commented from the doorway, with an expression Julian couldn't quite decipher. "It was the best day I've had in years," he replied with total sincerity. That night, after Clara and the boys left, Julian found himself alone in his spacious penthouse, which suddenly seemed too big, too silent. He noticed the sauce stains on his expensive Italian marble countertop, and instead of calling the cleaning service, he decided to clean them himself, storing every moment of the day in his memory like an unexpected treasure. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Michael Davies. "The Americans are pulling out, Julian," he announced without preamble. "Jenkins says your new family situation represents an unacceptable risk to the project's stability. They need guarantees of your total commitment, or they're taking their money to Los Angeles." Julian looked at the sauce stain he was cleaning, physical proof of a day of genuine connection with his sons. A month ago, the news of losing the American investors would have devastated him. It would have triggered sleepless nights and aggressive strategies to reverse the situation. "Let them go," he replied with a calm that surprised them both. "What? Are you crazy? That's $200 million. We'll find other investors, Michael. Ones who understand that being a good father and a good businessman are not mutually exclusive." After hanging up, Julian sat on his terrace with a glass of wine, contemplating the lights of New York. For the first time in his adult life, he felt he had made a decision based on something deeper than financial gain or social prestige. And surprisingly, he felt neither fear nor regret, just a strange inner peace he had never experienced before. The path ahead was still uncertain. He had a lot to learn about being a father, about connecting emotionally, about prioritizing what was truly important. But for the first time, he felt he was walking in the right direction. June arrived in New York with a premature heat that announced an intense summer. At Clara's apartment, the twins were buzzing with excitement as they got ready for the St. Gabriel's School end-of-year festival. The traditional summer celebration, with its folk dances, food stalls, and games, was one of the most anticipated events of the school year. "Do you think Dad will come?" Miguel asked, as Clara helped him put on his costume for the bonfire dance. Clara exchanged a look with Alex, who was also waiting for her answer with evident interest. "He promised, didn't he? And so far, he's kept his promises." The boys nodded, but Clara saw the shadow of doubt on their faces. Despite Julian's genuine effort over the past month, the twins still feared he would disappear from their lives as suddenly as he had appeared. It was a fear she herself shared, although she tried not to show it. In his office in the Crystal Tower, Julian looked at his watch impatiently. The meeting with new potential investors for the Golden View residential project was running longer than expected. The group of Japanese businessmen, known for their meticulousness, were reviewing every detail of the plans with exasperating slowness. "Mr. Thorne," insisted Takashi Tanaka, the principal representative, "we need additional guarantees regarding the stability of the project's leadership for the next 3 years. Marcus, sitting next to Julian, shot him a significant look. Both knew they were referring to his personal situation, to the doubts about his commitment since the appearance of his children. "My team is the best in the country," Julian replied with studied diplomacy. "The company's structure guarantees the continuity of all projects, regardless of personal circumstances." Mr. Tanaka nodded without conviction. "However, in our culture, the personal commitment of the leader is fundamental. We have heard rumors about changes in your priorities." Julian looked at his watch again. 5:15. The school party started at 6, and he had promised the twins he would be there to see them in the traditional dance. He had exactly 45 minutes to end the meeting, navigate downtown traffic, and get to the school. "Mr. Tanaka," he finally said, standing up, "I greatly appreciate your interest in our project, and precisely because I value honesty, I must be frank with you. My priorities have indeed changed. 2 months ago, I discovered I have 2 8-year-old sons, and I am learning to be a father. This does not mean that my commitment to Thorne Construction has decreased, but that it is now part of a broader picture." A tense silence filled the boardroom. Marcus closed his eyes, anticipating financial disaster. To everyone's surprise, Mr. Tanaka smiled slightly. "Family is sacred, Mr. Thorne. In Japan, a man who honors his family responsibilities is considered trustworthy in business." He paused and added, "We will continue this conversation tomorrow. I believe you have an important commitment now." Julian arrived at St. Gabriel's School with barely 5 minutes to spare. The schoolyard was transformed into a festive summer celebration. Colored garlands, food stalls, folk music, and hundreds of families enjoying themselves together. An environment completely alien to the corporate world he usually moved in. He felt like an alien in his Italian designer suit, among casually dressed parents. The curious glances and whispers followed him as he looked for Clara and the boys. "Julian, over here!" Clara's voice guided him to a corner where she was waiting with a group of teachers. She wore a simple summer dress that nevertheless highlighted her natural elegance. Julian felt an unexpected quickening of his pulse as he saw her smile. "You made it," she said, in a tone that mixed surprise and satisfaction. "I promised," he replied simply. "The boys are with their group, getting ready for the dance. They'll start any minute." While they waited, Julian noticed the friendly stares of some parents and teachers. Clearly, his sudden appearance in the twins' lives after 8 years of absence had generated comments. "Don't pay attention to them," Clara said, sensing his discomfort. "People always talk. The important thing is that you're here now. Do you think they'll ever forgive me? Not just the boys. You too." Clara looked at him directly, with that frankness that had always characterized her. "It's not about forgiving, Julian. It's about building something new from where we are now." Before he could reply, the music for the traditional dance began. A group of children, including Alex and Miguel, came out to the center of the yard, forming a circle around a representation of the bonfire. The twins, focused on remembering the steps, had not yet seen their father. Julian watched, fascinated, as his sons moved to the rhythm of the traditional music, so different from him in their naturalness, in their lack of self-consciousness. As he watched them spin and jump, he felt a wave of pride so intense it was almost painful. It was Miguel who saw him first. In the middle of a spin, his eyes met Julian's in the crowd. His face lit up with a smile of pure joy that completely transformed his usually serious expression. Leaning toward his brother, he whispered something in his ear. Alex, without missing a beat, looked until he found his father and gave a discreet wave. That small gesture, that silent connection in the middle of the dance, triggered an emotion in Julian he had never experienced. A lump formed in his throat as he waved back, aware that he was witnessing one of those life-defining moments. At the end of the dance, the twins ran towards him, still in their costumes, bursting with energy and pride. "Dad, did you see us? Did you see how I jumped over the bonfire without making a mistake?" Alex exclaimed, clinging to his arm. "You did it perfectly," Julian replied, kneeling down to their level. "I'm very proud of you." "Mr. Thorne," a male voice interrupted from behind him. "What a surprise to see you so involved." Julian stood up to find himself face to face with David Miller, the father of Miguel's best friend. The man looked at him with evident suspicion. "The children are my sons," Julian replied calmly. "Of course I'm involved." After 8 years of absence, David retorted with a sarcastic tone. "Very convenient to show up now that they've grown up, isn't it? While Clara carried all the responsibility alone." Julian felt the immediate tension of the twins watching the exchange with worried expressions. Clara intervened quickly. "David, I appreciate your concern, but this is neither the time nor the place," she said firmly. The man reluctantly nodded. "I'm sorry, Clara. You know how much our family appreciates the boys." He gave Julian a final skeptical look before walking away. "He won't be the last," Clara commented as she guided everyone toward the food stalls. "The people in the neighborhood have seen me raise the children alone all these years. They've become protective." Julian nodded, understanding for the first time the intricate social fabric that Clara had built around their sons. A community that protected them, that valued them, that had been present when he was not. The night went on with traditional games, music, and laughter. Julian found himself participating in activities he never would have imagined. Throwing rings at bottles, fishing for rubber ducks in a small improvised pool, even joining a circle dance when the teachers encouraged all the parents to participate. "I never thought I'd see you dancing a folk dance," Clara commented, watching him with a amused smile as Julian tried to follow the steps alongside other parents. "Me neither," he admitted, laughing at his own clumsiness. "But it turns out there are a lot of things I never thought I'd do." The culminating moment came when the organizers announced the final dance, the traditional family dance. Children were to dance with their parents around the symbolic bonfire, a ritual that represented family unity and protection from evil spirits. Julian looked at Clara, unsure. She nodded slightly. "Go on. They're waiting for you." Alex and Miguel were already in the circle, looking at him expectantly. With a mix of nervousness and determination, Julian joined them. The first notes of the traditional music resonated in the schoolyard, and the families began to move in a circle, following steps that had been passed down from generation to generation. "I don't know the steps," Julian confessed to the twins. "It doesn't matter," Miguel replied, taking his hand. "We'll guide you." And so, guided by his own sons, Julian Thorne, the powerful real estate magnate, danced awkwardly under the June stars, feeling for the first time in his adult life that he truly belonged to something bigger than his ambitions and material achievements. From the periphery of the circle, Clara watched the scene with a mix of contradictory emotions. Seeing Julian dancing with his sons, vulnerable and authentic as she had never seen him before, stirred up feelings she thought were long forgotten. It reminded her of the idealistic young man she had fallen in love with in college, before ambition transformed him. The party ended after 10 o'clock, with sleepy children and satisfied parents gathering the last memories of the evening. "Can I walk you home?" Julian asked as he helped carry the twins' backpacks. Clara nodded, and the four of them walked together through the streets of Old New York, the boys excitedly recounting their experiences of the night, Julian and Clara exchanging occasional meaningful glances. When they arrived at the entrance to Clara's building, the boys insisted Julian come up to show him the drawings they had made of him in art class. The apartment, warm and cozy, was a sharp contrast to Julian's luxurious but cold penthouse. Children's drawings decorated the walls, books filled the shelves, and small details everywhere spoke of a life lived simply, but with purpose. While the boys looked for their drawings, Julian found himself alone with Clara in the small kitchen. "Thank you for today," he said, "for letting me be a part of this." Clara prepared tea with precise, familiar movements. "You did well. The boys were happy you were there. And David Miller was right, you know, about my convenient appearance after 8 years. Clara put down the teapot and looked at him directly. "We all make mistakes, Julian. The important thing is what we do after we recognize them." At that moment, something changed in the atmosphere between them. A different kind of tension, a possibility that neither of them had seriously considered until then. Julian took a step toward her, guided by an impulse he couldn't rationally explain. "Clara," he began. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Michael Davies, calling urgently from the office. "I'm sorry, Julian, but the Japanese have moved up the final meeting to first thing tomorrow morning. They need your decision on whether you'll accept the exclusive dedication clause they're proposing." Clara, who had unintentionally overheard the conversation, turned her back to him and continued preparing the tea. Her body language suddenly closing off. "I'll be there at 8, Julian replied before hanging up. He looked at Clara, knowing that the moment of connection had been lost. "I have to go." She nodded without turning around. "The boys will understand." "It's not that," he said, moving closer, but not touching her. "It's not about leaving now. It's about a decision I have to make tomorrow, one that will affect a lot of people." Clara finally turned to look at him. "Including Alex and Miguel." "Especially them," Julian confirmed. "And you." At that moment, the twins burst into the kitchen with their drawings, breaking the tension. Julian said goodbye shortly after, promising to come back soon, knowing that the decision he would make the next day could change the course of all their lives. That night, alone in his penthouse overlooking a lit-up New York, Julian Thorne contemplated two divergent paths. One was familiar, paved with financial success and social recognition. The other was unknown, uncertain, but promised something he was only now beginning to value. Authentic connections, moments of genuine joy, the opportunity to be part of something that would last longer than any building he could ever construct. The dawn of the first day of June painted the New York sky with soft pink and orange tones. Exactly 1 year had passed since that day that changed Julian Thorne's life forever. 12 months that had transformed the ruthless real estate magnate into a different man, with priorities his old self would never have recognized. Julian watched the city wake up from the window of a modest apartment in the bustling neighborhood near St. Gabriel's School. He had moved there just a month ago, leaving his luxurious downtown penthouse for a home closer to his children. The walls, once bare, now proudly displayed Alex and Miguel's drawings. The shelves, once filled with expensive designer objects, now held children's books, small sports trophies, and family photographs. "Nervous?" Clara's voice brought him back to the present. She stood at the kitchen door, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "A little," Julian admitted, accepting the mug she offered. "It's a big day." Clara nodded, standing beside him to watch the sunrise together. "The boys are very excited. Miguel has been practicing his speech all week." The event to be held that afternoon in the St. Gabriel's schoolyard was not a wedding. like the one that had been thwarted a year ago. It was a different ceremony, but infinitely more meaningful to Julian. The official recognition of his paternity, combined with the presentation of the project that had consumed his energy for the last few months. The path to this moment had been full of difficult decisions and profound transformations. The morning after the end-of-year festival, Julian had walked into the boardroom of the Crystal Tower with a clarity he had never experienced before. "I will not accept the exclusive dedication clause," he had announced to the Japanese investors, to the dismay of his team. "My time with my children is not negotiable. I offer you my experience, my vision, and my commitment to excellence, but within a framework that respects my family life." Against all expectations, Mr. Tanaka had smiled. "An honorable position, Mr. Thorne. In Japan, we value men who establish clear boundaries. We will modify the clause to reflect this balance." Not all the decisions had been so fortunate. In mid-July, when the Thorne Construction Board of Directors voted against his proposal to redirect part of the company's resources toward social housing projects, Julian understood that he had reached an unavoidable crossroads. "You've changed, Julian," Robert Hayes had told him after the tense meeting, "and I'm not sure it's for the better, at least from a business perspective." Perhaps the most difficult moment had come in September, when he discovered that a subsidiary of his own company had secretly acquired the land where St. Gabriel's School was located, with plans to turn it into a luxury apartment complex. The news had reached him through Clara, who was devastated to learn that the school where she taught and where her children attended faced an eviction notice for the next school year. "It's your company, Julian," she had told him, her voice trembling. "While you were playing with the boys, your company was planning to destroy their community." That night, alone in his penthouse, Julian had faced the biggest identity crisis of his life. The empire he had built, the values he had defended for decades, were now turning against what he valued most. The conflict between his past and his present could not have been more evident. The decision he made then was the one that culminated in this day in June. He had invested his personal savings and sold his majority stake in Thorne Construction to create a new foundation dedicated to education and social housing. His first project, to save and renovate St. Gabriel's School, turning it into a model educational center. "The boys are awake now," Clara commented, interrupting his memories. "Miguel is trying on his tie for the 5th time." Julian smiled. The relationship between them had evolved slowly over the past year, moving from initial distrust to mutual respect, and finally, to something deeper that neither of them dared to fully name yet. It was the small moments that rebuilt the bridge between them. The school meetings they attended together, the family dinners every Friday, the quiet conversations after the children had gone to sleep. And above all, it was Julian's genuine transformation that had finally broken down Clara's last barriers. "Do you think I did the right thing?" Julian asked, looking at her directly. "Giving up everything I built for 20 years? Clara gently placed her hand over his. "You built buildings, Julian. Now you're building lives, including your own." The ceremony at St. Gabriel's School brought together the entire school community, along with city council representatives and local media. In the festively decorated yard, a small stage had been erected where Julian, Clara, and the twins would take center stage for the presentation. Among the audience, Julian distinguished faces that represented the different stages of his life. Marcus, his loyal assistant, who had decided to follow him in his new project. Some of his old partners, attending more out of curiosity than support. David Miller, and other parents from the school, whose initial skepticism had given way to cautious acceptance. Notably absent was Victoria, who had rebuilt her life away from New York after overcoming the pain and humiliation of the canceled wedding. Julian had sent her a sincere letter months ago, taking responsibility and wishing her happiness. A letter she had replied to briefly with a simple, "I forgive you. Be happy." "Welcome, everyone," began the school director, an energetic woman who had fought tirelessly against the eviction. "Today we celebrate not only the salvation of our beloved St. Gabriel's School, but its rebirth as a cutting-edge educational center, accessible to all." Applause echoed through the yard as the director handed the microphone to Julian, who took the stage accompanied by Clara and the twins. "Exactly 1 year ago," he began, his voice slightly trembling, "my life changed forever, at a very different ceremony than this one. That day I discovered I had 2 sons I didn't know, and I began a journey that has taught me more about value, authenticity, and love than I learned in 20 years of building a real estate empire." He paused, looking at Alex and Miguel, who were watching him with evident pride. For 8 years, these wonderful children grew up without a father, not because they couldn't have one, but because I chose ambition over responsibility. It's a mistake I can't undo, but one I can transform into something positive for them and for our community. Julian then explained the details of the project. St. Gabriel's School would not only be saved from demolition, but would be expanded with new facilities, scholarships for low-income families, and an innovative educational program that integrated technology with human values. "This project is not a public relations strategy or an attempt to clean up my image," he continued. "It's my way of honoring what truly matters, the future of our children, the strength of our community, and the values we want to pass on to the next generations." When his presentation was over, it was Miguel who took the microphone. To the surprise of many, the usually shy boy looked at the audience with determination. "Before I met my dad, I thought dads were just for playing soccer and giving presents at Christmas," he said with the clarity and sincerity of an 8-year-old. "But now I know that a dad is someone who can make mistakes, learn from them, and do incredible things to fix them. And that's much better than never making a mistake at all." The boy's words brought emotional laughter and some moist eyes from the audience. Julian, moved to the point of being speechless, simply hugged his son as Alex spontaneously joined in. Clara, watching the scene, felt the last reservations in her heart dissolve completely. The man who was now hugging her sons was not the ambitious and calculating Julian she had known in college, nor the real estate mogul who had invited her to his wedding out of revenge. He was a new man, forged through love and responsibility. The ceremony continued, with the official signing of the documents that guaranteed the permanence and renovation of the school, followed by a simple celebration with food and music. While the children played with their friends and the adults chatted in small groups, Julian and Clara found a moment of quiet together by an old oak tree that presided over the schoolyard. "Do you remember what you told me a year ago, when I asked if you would ever forgive me?" Julian asked. Clara nodded. "I said it wasn't about forgiving, but about building something new from where we were. And do you think we've succeeded?" In response, Clara naturally took his hand. "We're getting there. The foundations are solid this time." Julian looked around. The school he had saved, the children playing carefree, the community that was slowly accepting him as one of their own. His old life of luxury and appearances had transformed into something simpler, but infinitely richer in meaning. "You know," he said with a thoughtful smile, "I spent 20 years building buildings that will probably last half a century before being demolished and replaced. Now, I understand that what we build in the hearts of our children will remain long after any physical structure." Clara gently squeezed his hand. "That's the difference between building a legacy and building a life." As the sun began to descend over the schoolyard, lighting up the laughter and conversations of the gathered community with a golden light. Julian Thorne finally understood that he had found his true home, not in walls of glass and steel, but in the invisible yet unbreakable bonds that now united him with his sons, with Clara, and with a future full of authentic possibilities. Let us know in the comments if you liked this story. What was the most impactful moment for you?